Hey there, I'm Rob Wegner.
And I'm Brian Phipps, and we both serve on the leadership team of Westside Family Church in Kansas City.
In this case study video, we want to unpack for you how we're trying to make disciples who can make disciples, that can plant simple churches, that plant simple churches, that can make disciples, that make disciples, that plant simple churches. You get the idea. And there's a fundamental dynamic in that whole process. We're trying to equip every disciple of Jesus to not just discover their general calling to be a disciple maker, but also their personal calling, their one-of-a-kind, Ephesians 2:10 masterpiece mission, where God's already deployed them in their corner of culture and their sphere of society.
Yeah, so in the next few moments, we want to answer 3 different questions. And the first question is this: what actually makes for an intentional disciple-making environment? And then secondly, what are some examples of those intentional disciple-making environments? And then finally, how do we integrate personal calling into those intentional disciple-making environments?
See how I did that?
That was good.
It's better than keynote. So, first of all, what actually makes up an intentional disciple-making environment? Let's be honest, the word discipleship has become so broad that it's now flat. So many curriculums and groups and events get labeled as discipleship. But if you're a seasoned church leader, you know that so many of these so-called discipleship tools don't really end up making disciples or disciple makers. In fact, many of them consist of basically the data dump, and they largely leave people's souls and lives unchanged. And if we don't have the key ingredients for disciple-making environments, then we end up with overeducated, underdeveloped consumers of religious goods and services. And maybe right now you're going, that sounds hauntingly familiar. I mean, I know I've spent a lot of time in that place going, man, trying to disciple, but it just seems like we're just doing the information transfer. And what it gets back to, what we've discovered is that there are key ingredients for disciple-making environments. And when those are in place, lives actually get changed. Disciple-making movements actually happen. So let me just tell you about Jamie, for example. He's a friend of ours, and he started as an agnostic addict, and he's now a man who's discipling his neighbors. He's in the process, he discovered his own personal calling, which led to a career shift from sales to leading a nonprofit organization that now is serving the marginalized in one of the toughest neighborhoods in Kansas City. And what's really cool about what God's been doing is we could literally share scores and scores of stories like that. And if you were to ask us, how did it happen? It's not that we're so good. We're just stumbling, bumbling people. But we have discovered these key ingredients that make for intentional disciple-making environments, and God's Spirit is catalyzing those. So why don't we talk a little bit about what those ingredients are?
Yeah, intentional disciple-making environments, or what I'm going to call IDEs from this point forward, are 3 things. They're outcome-focused, they're habit-fueled, and they're content-flavored. I'll say that again. They're outcome-focused, habit-fueled, and content-flavored. Our groups focus on developing the spiritual outcomes of character and calling. Why is that? Well, Jesus, through His Spirit, transforms us by bearing fruit in our lives, and those fruit of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and so on transform our character.
So that's the character development.
That's the character development piece. That's the work He does in you. Jesus also transforms us, however, by depositing spiritual gifts into us, which are a primary indicator of the calling that He has for our lives. And since transformation is the goal, and since character and calling are the 2 primary ways Jesus transforms us, then we focus on those outcomes. So they're outcome focused, but IDEs are fueled by spiritual habits. The information, the content doesn't get you to those outcomes. That's why it requires habits. And just like physical fitness comes through physical exercises, spiritual fitness comes through the spiritual habits of regular Bible reading, journaling, prayer, accountability, serving others. And those are the primary ones.
But each of those environments teach different habits. Some are more about missional, incarnational living.
Yep.
Some are more about the practices that feed your soul.
Yeah.
You know, so actually in these different environments, there's quite a large suite of habits that we teach over time.
At varying levels, you know, of commitment. If they're early in the phase, they're small, and as they grow. So they're outcome focused, they're habit fueled, and finally our IDEs are content flavored. Just as coffee can be flavored in a variety of ways, the content of an IDE can be interchanged to suit the participant's current level of spiritual development. And because of this DNA, the IDE, the intentional disciple-making environment, these environments invite the question, how will I be different after this group is over? Which is a much more powerful and life-changing question than simply, what will you be studying?
That's for sure.
The big one.
And the other important piece of this is that all three of those ingredients happen in the context of community and mission.
Yeah.
So when we say community, here's what we mean. Jesus ordered his relational world in a particular way. Jesus had one, he had the 3, the 12, the 72, and the crowds. The one was his Father, and that's where he found his identity and his destiny. The 3 were Peter, James, and John. That was the place for intimacy and transparency. The 12 were his team. That was the place where there was support, challenge, closeness.
Fun.
Yeah, fun, shared mission. Yeah. And then the 72, that was his larger tribe, his extended family on mission. And of course, the crowds of hundreds and thousands where people were inspired and celebrated was also the place where mission and ministry was happening. Every disciple needs all 5 community environments because discipleship is a team sport. If Jesus ordered his spheres of influence in this way, as the Son of God, then how much more do we need that? We don't just need Jesus' message, we also need his methods. So these relational environments, all of them are necessary, but they're also energized not with an insular focus on us, but an external focus on the mission of Jesus to redeem and restore people and places. And everyone is challenged to live as a missionary, where they live, work, study, and play. And everybody is challenged to discover their personal calling in their corner of culture and their sphere of society.
Yeah, they're challenged, but more than that, they're just kind of drawn into it.
They are.
That's not something that we have to compel them to do. Mm-hmm. You know, when they start to taste a sense of personal calling and being a part of a greater mission,
Yep.
that's something that they have motivated from God himself.
Yeah, internally.
Internally.
Yep.
Well, the other key component in this thing is reproduction. Every disciple is challenged to make disciples, and every intentional disciple-making environment is a reproducing environment. So that leads us to the second question. What are some examples of IDEs that we have developed in our context? And we've created a whole suite of these things, the intentional disciple-making environments that will equip you first to be a disciple who can make disciples, who then can plant churches and simple churches and large churches and whatnot. We've had a lot of these folks come out. At the beginning of our suite is an experience we call Followers Made. And Followers Made is a 6-month experience where folks discover character and calling, equipping them to become a disciple that ends up making disciples. You start to develop that character, you start to discover what your calling is and start to walk in that, both in the group and outside. Following that is an experience called Leaders Made, and Leaders Made is a 12-month experience that helps people discover servant leadership and what it means to lead a community or lead other people on mission.
We've also developed something called the Blessed Learning Community. This is a 3-month experience where people begin to develop a lifestyle around 5 incarnational rhythms that equip them to live as missionaries, where they live, work, study, shop, and play. And then, following that, is what we call a simple church learning community. As people live those blessed rhythms, communities begin to develop. You could call that a proto-church. Mm-hmm. And in this 12-month experience that equips them to then move step by step in planting a simple form of church, an extended spiritual family living on mission together, either in their neighborhood or their network.
All right, well, back to reproduction. Each of these IDEs raises up new disciple makers, coaches, and trainers. Followers Made has been running the longest, and we have 4 generations of reproduction on several strands at our church, which has resulted in nearly 1,000 people that have been equipped to be disciples and make disciples.
Here's the thing that's crazy about this. I moved here 4 years ago, and when I saw this grassroots movement unfolding, I've not really seen anything like that before. And then when I found out this had never been promoted, never been in a bulletin or a program, no one had ever got up and taught about it and asked everybody to sign up. All of it had just been disciples, making disciples, and make disciples. I was amazed.
Well, it was crazy, but I just refused to allow it to be promoted widespread. It would be invitation only, and I even refused to let it be online. finally there was so much demand, we had to put it online so people knew what it was. But we require a lot of initiative in order to be invited and things like that. So, yeah, it's all been an underground, life-on-life movement, and all these experiences, we're helping people grow in character and calling. And that takes us to the next question. How is personal calling integrated into all this? We've mentioned that it's calling and character, which is in itself a newer idea, ancient idea that's kind of being brought back forward. But what would you say?
Well, as you know, this whole resource kit is about mobilizing God's people God's way. And the primary way that people are being mobilized in the prevailing model in the church in America is we have our programs, and those programs have predetermined slots for volunteers. And most churches then are simply trying to take folks, and if they're thoughtful, hopefully they're doing it in a gift-based way, saying, can we find the right people for the right slots?
Right.
If they're desperate, and things are urgent enough, it's like we're just trying to plug people in. What we're looking at in this resource is how do we help people actually discover their personal calling as their primary ministry. And we want to help people do this assessment to discover that one-of-a-kind masterpiece mission. So we've developed an assessment process we call GPS. Brian's filmed a whole separate video on GPS that you can also watch. You'll see that in this section. That will give a little more detail, but let's hit the highlights. Currently, you probably have some kind of GPS technology on your body. It's probably on your watch or maybe in your phone, and GPS, of course, stands for Global Positioning System. There's 24 satellites that are sending time-stamped information orbiting the Earth, and your GPS unit in your phone or on your watch, it can navigate those signals, and it triangulates them to pinpoint where you are. And then also, as you know, with many apps, you can actually pinpoint your destination and know how to get there. Well, what we believe is the Spirit of God has given a similar technology for our souls, and it will help us triangulate our pathway to personal calling. And for us, GPS stands for Gifts, Passion, Story. The clearer signal that you're receiving on your gifts, your passions, and your story, the more clearly you'll be able to see your pathway forward into personal calling.
And so we break it down first into gifts, as he said, and in the gifts section of our online assessment, we look at both the natural and the supernatural gifts. When we use our natural abilities and work, we join God in creating and adding value to this world. And at our second birth, we've also been given spiritual gifts to build up the church, which will eventually fill the earth and bless all people. So in the passion section of the assessment, we help people discern three primary dimensions of passion. First is a people passion, and we ask the question, what particular people has Jesus given you a passion for? Who were you called to live incarnationally among? So there's a people passion, there's a cause passion. What particular causes in this world cause you to light up? What could you sit up all night and dream about and talk about and plan in order to accomplish? And then finally, we also have what we call a spiritual influencing style or an influencing passion. And in Ephesians chapter 4, we learn that there's 5 primary influencing styles. Others call APEST. You know, that's how it's been known for a number of years. We just try to put that language on a more bottom shelf where I can understand it. But he's given us 5 primary influencing styles to help the church grow to maturity and fullness. And those 5 influencing styles are apostles, who send and extend, prophets, who question and challenge, evangelists, who proclaim and invite, and shepherds, who guide and provide, finally, teachers, who explain and organize. Now, in the story section, we help people actually look back in order to look forward. Our lives are a story. They're a parable that only Jesus can rightly experience for us. And we help people deeply reflect on what is beautiful and what is broken in their stories in order to find the deeper meaning of how Jesus is shaping them for a calling through all those life experiences. And all that's done on that online assessment. So as they discover their personal calling, they're sharing this with their 3, their triad, and their 12, their group in particular, where they are challenged and supported to move forward into their personal calling, as well as equipping to know how to lead others in that calling. And we encourage everyone to realize that they aren't just a volunteer who does ministry in an hour or 2 in a week. They're actually ministers, and ministry includes all of life. Being a missionary is for all of us, and it includes every aspect of our life. And the stories of impact that are emerging in every corner of culture here in Kansas City is truly a God thing. Jamie is just an example. Well, in the next video, you're going to hear one of those awesome stories. It's the story of Andy, directly from him. So also, if you're interested, we're offering our resources online for free. You can visit disciplesmade.com, or you can download the Disciples Made app to learn more. In essence, these are the OS. The IDE is the operating system that your GPS can run on. Run GPS as an OS, it's going to crash.
It's true. It's not a standalone thing.
It's not a standalone thing.
Again, all calling happens within
The context of community and mission.
That's right.
Absolutely. Run GPS on the OS of disciple making, however, it leads to the life you have always wanted.
Well, I hope this was helpful, and we ask that you continue to think and pray about your next step as a community, and feel free to reach out to us. We'll list our emails in the resource section, and we'd love to talk to you.
Absolutely. God bless you.